Drumgold, this was an extraordinary trial.
To be frank, I think that's a value judgment.
While forensically it was an ordinary case of its type, on the other hand, it involved Parliament House, it involved an emerging political movement relating to victims of sexual offences. It involved the Prime Minister, it involved Logies.
There had been an enormous amount of public interest in the trial, hadn't there?
Yes.
Right around Australia.
And the world.
And the world.
The criminal trial of Bruce Lehrmann was about the alleged rape of former political staffer Brittany Higgins in a minister's office at Parliament House. Mr. Lerman maintains his innocence and has never had any findings made against him.
This was, if not the most high-profile sexual assault case in Australia's history, then certainly one of the most high-profile cases.
The trial ran for just under a month before it was aborted following a juror's misconduct. A planned retrial was abandoned by the DPP.
I've made the difficult decision that it is no longer in the public interest to pursue a prosecution at the risk of a complainant's life.
For the past 3 weeks, an inquiry has been underway in Canberra.
It's giving us a rare look inside the Australian legal systems. We're seeing the internals of a prosecution, how the decision to undertake a trial is taken, as well as the methods and decision-making of the internal players.
I'm not interested in whether Mr. Lerman's guilty or not guilty.
This inquiry is not a trial. It is not set up to pass judgments or to make assessments about blame or guilt. If it does find that the ACT justice system is not fit for purpose, it has the potential to make recommendations for legislative or regulatory changes or changes in law enforcement processes.
It was triggered in part by a letter from the top prosecutor in the Territory, Shane Drumgold, to the head of ACT Police, alleging investigator interference in the criminal justice process and claiming the police had constant, exclusive, direct engagement with the defence team and had clearly aligned with them rather than the prosecution. There should be a public inquiry into both political and police conduct in this matter, Mr. Drumgold wrote. The ACT government appointed retired Queensland Supreme Court Judge Walter Sofronoff as chair of the inquiry.
Public inquiries unavoidably hurt some people's reputations. To the extent that damage to reputation is unavoidable, then it has to be lived with.
Drumgold himself has come under scrutiny.
A very bruising session at the Parliament House rape trial inquiry.
In the first week, the inquiry examined the conduct of the man who called for it to be set up. Counsel assisting zeroed in on the advice the DPP gave journalist Lisa Wilkinson ahead of a possible speech at the Logies.
Do you think the correct thing to have done would have been to have advised her not to give that speech?
At the time, look, in hindsight, I probably should have taken a different approach. Look, I would accept that I entirely misread the situation. Honestly, but entirely misread that situation.
The bigger concession was still to come. Shane Drumgold had said he suspected political interference in the case based on the behaviour of the police. It was a claim he maintained at the inquiry until this.
So I take it that sitting here now, having had available to you material that you haven't seen before, you would acknowledge that your suspicions about the existence of political interference to prevent the case properly going ahead were mistaken?
I do.
That seems to have been walked back, and now his concerns are expressed more in terms of incompetence.
Mr. Drumgold told the inquiry the relationship between his prosecutor's office and police had deteriorated due to differences over how sexual assault charges should be handled. In the Lerman case, he says police repeatedly tried to convince him the case was flawed.
Now I'm looking at unprecedented pressure being placed on me, an unprecedented passion that a number of police held that this matter shouldn't proceed.
12 jurors are inside the ACT Supreme Court currently deciding the verdict on this high-profile rape trial.
On October 20 last year, the jury had retired to consider their verdict.
At 10:15 that morning, Defence Barrister Stephen Wybrow says he met with one of the detectives on the case at a cafe just across the road from the legal precinct and the DPP's office. When they met again 5 days later, Mr. Wybrow told the inquiry the detective was anxious not to be seen from the DPP's office, so they went around the corner into a nearby lane.
Mr. Wybrow says the detective told him he thought Mr. Lerman was innocent.
He said to you that if the jury came back with a guilty verdict, that he would resign from the police force.
Words to that effect is my recollection, yes.
You say in your statement that you've never before had a conversation with a police officer of that kind?
Correct.
This week, the inquiry has heard from Senior Policeman Detective Superintendent Moller, who defended his colleague meeting with the defence.
Did you see any issues with that?
No, I didn't.
Why not?
It's normal process to engage with defence as it is prosecution. That's part of what we have to do.
The degree of contact with the defence needs to be looked at in the context of the rest of what's gone on here.
Moller was also the officer who wrote a briefing for his boss that became known as the Moller Report. It questioned Miss Higgins' credibility and accused her of being manipulative with police. The DPP has dismissed the document as a misguided analysis.
Police are sometimes accused of old-fashioned views.
Yes.
The police stand by their investigation, though they have made concessions too, including that they were wrong to hand over audiovisual recordings of Miss Higgins' evidence and her counselling records to the defence. But Superintendent Moller said that when police were asked to write statements about the disclosure, the team became concerned the DPP was collecting evidence to use against them later on.
I think there's a disjunct that is not healthy there. There are quite some accusations going back and forth between the DPP and various figures within the police. And I think that the relationship is important both as a working relationship but also for public confidence in the way that justice is administered.
The hearings continue, with the inquiry due to report to the ACT government next month.
This inquiry has the potential to change the ways in which sexual assaults are investigated and tried.
It's not bad to have disagreements. It's more how those disagreements are handled. And I don't doubt there could be a way back. Whether that's one that all the parties involved are happy with is perhaps another matter.